I am here with my friend Drew Hodgdon today, former Texans offensive lineman, center actually. Drew, tell me how you feel about the whole two quarterback conundrum right now.
I feel like it almost doesn't even count as a conundrum because they clearly don't have a standout player, as evidenced by the fact that they're even willing to rotate these two guys. So, I don't have an issue with it. I think we were talking a little bit offline. I think it's probably the best thing you can do to try to promote some kind of competitive atmosphere for those guys. That's never a bad thing. I don't know that they're going to get great results, but I don't have an issue with it inherently.
Right, yeah, I should. Conundrum just, I'm too addicted to alliteration, I think. I didn't have that written down or anything. It just sounded good.
No, it sounded prompted. It was really good.
It's a little bit, I guess it's a little bit of a conundrum just in that I always get tempted to think, okay, that looked awful good, and it looked better than anything did before in this season offensively. And I just wonder, like, sometimes if teams try so hard to chase the ideal that you want to have a quarterback and it's his team and this is the guy that's going to lead us to glory, when realistically there's only several teams in the league that feel awesome about their quarterback, and maybe you shouldn't be chasing that ideal, especially nowadays when it's just people are so much more open to an athletic quarterback who maybe doesn't have a great arm coming in and doing some damage. And then you have like DavisMills. If you had a better version of DavisMills and a better version of Jeff Driskel, and they were cool, especially if they were young guys that maybe figured one of them would leave someday, I don't think the downside is as great as people think. The downside that people always fear is that they won't get into a rhythm or a flow or whatever. Mm-hmm. But if you're not trying to paint a masterpiece, I don't know how much that flow actually matters.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I think obviously when the stakes are relatively low, as they are in this case, it's a lot easier to make that decision. Yeah. Because there's something to be said for, devil's advocate, I guess, is that there's only so many reps during practice. There's only so many looks that each of those guys get, right? So in preparation for the games, if you have a game plan that may try to take advantage of having two players with, complementary skill sets but different, then you're having to really come up with a game plan A that suits them both.
Yeah.
And then you're having to practice against those specific looks during the game. The argument for it, obviously, is I think there aren't too many examples, but you are kind of describing maybe like the New Orleans Saints from a few years ago, right? When they had, they had a nice little rotation going there between those guys. I think that worked pretty well. Obviously, that's not really the player profile that they have in Houston, but there's an argument for it. I mean, people, players, coaches in the NFL, I mean, people are so used to the status quo.
Yeah.
Everyone pushes back against that stuff. It'd be interesting to see more of it, but,
Yeah, the practice part is a really good point, and because the defense is going to have to adjust for two different game plans, but because the offense is going to have to be simpler because they can only practice so many things and get really good at them, I guess that's where the offensive genius that could pull it off would have to, and honestly, I feel like we talk about the Kubiak-Shanahan system all the time, but I feel like in that system with a little RPO added, you're able to do a lot of the things a similar way. Like Matt Schaub was really good at running that system, even though he wasn't a great athlete. It's just getting him out on the bootleg. Peyton Manning, back in the day when they had Edger and James, they were all about naked boot and everything, and it wasn't because Peyton was flying out to the edges, stressing people with his legs.
No, but they were really good at ensuring that the defense had to respect what it was that they were trying to do.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they were fully capable of, the defense had to at least respect what the attempt was.
Yeah.
And the challenge, I think, especially when you talk about rotating, is that you're only ever doing it because one of the guys brings a lot to the table that the other one doesn't, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're assuming that either means he can probably run the ball. He's more mobile, or he can, give you some kind of flexibility with the formations or something else, personnel groups.
It's got to be they're different skill sets. Yeah, it works best when they complement each other, just like in New Orleans.
Yeah, which makes it tough because then if the defense, you're assuming you're doing it to exploit a weakness in the defense. Well, the defense is dialed in to why you're doing it. So you got to be the kind of coordinator that is playing three-dimensional chess, realizing they're doing it. You got to subvert whatever it is they're expecting. I think it's great if you have those guys. I think it's just tougher to manage from a coach's standpoint.
It would be better if you had one guy. Let's say Taysom Hill was bigger and could be like an actual viable receiving tight end, like an actual. Which I mean, I guess he was. Whatever he was an offensive threat or an offensive weapon. But if you actually had a quarterback that was like big enough to be a receiving tight end, but who could also come down and block in the core against every now and then. But then
he could function as like an H-back, but then he's not a quarterback really anymore, right?
What you need is Gronkowski, but use him less effectively as a quarterback part of the time. All right. I get your point. It's hard to play in the NFL. This is where I want to start off with the goal line, the ill-fated, 4th and a long 3. In my brain, this 4th down attempt that could have sealed the game because it was 23-20 at this point. They'd gotten stuffed when they tried to run Rex Burkhead one play before when it was just 4th and less than a yard. This is because of that tackle for a loss that they are where they are. But this was the play that would live in infamy for anybody who was actually watching because it looked like Jeff Driskel either went the wrong way or the design was for him to have like a little bit of a fake rollout and then come back. But it was just a disaster, and because it didn't look like, and according to Sanchez, it didn't look like Burkhead and Driskel were on the same page on this afterwards anyway. But the one thing that I noticed was that you've got 4 offensive linemen / tight ends that were blocking in the direction of the yellow arrows there, and then you had one guy in Kenyon Green at left guard that was instead of blocking to his left, he's blocking down on that defensive tackle, which ends up leaving that defensive end scot-free. You go to the other red arrow is Driskel and where he's going to take off for. And I don't want to try to figure this out too much because I feel like multiple people might have screwed up here. But I feel like even if Driskel wheels his head around immediately, before I think he even sees that guy that's coming clean, like right there, if that were a sprint option to the left, he would have his eyes straight down towards the defensive end, would he not?
Right. Yeah. Correct. And it also, if you're trying to assume that he reacted that way, that would be just like a preternatural ability to react. I just don't think that's. He's already got his clean. Yeah, the footwork is too clean. Exactly. He's not shuffling. He's not. Yeah. I don't even think he sees the guy that comes free. So the expectation is that he should be blocked. Right?
I felt like if he saw the guy that came free, he would have taken a different route or had more urgency to try to get the hell away from him.
Absolutely, and it wouldn't have been so clean. It looks like he may be doing the wrong thing or going the wrong way, but that looked to me like that was his plan.
Yeah,
whatever it was.
I guess I've gone through the gamut of. Sunday after the game, I figured Kenyon Green and Jeff Driskel screwed up. Now I'm kind of PO'd at, I think, Pep Hamilton for the design of the play. Although, if this guy had gotten blocked properly, I guess the thinking was they were going to try to draw this backer over with that sprint action to the left. Oh, I don't know, man. I realize you can't see my arrow there. So I'm blaming Pep Hamilton more than I was before because I think it was poor play design.
It was poor play design. Yeah. It's poor play design because none of these plays exist in a vacuum. They had multiple plays down there. So the assumption is that, you're planning with the potential, especially on the goal line, that you might be short and you got to plan for the next one. So, they lost basically, like you said, a yard and a half or a couple of yards in the play prior, and then they come back with this, which just makes the prior play look even worse.
Yeah, and he probably were right, because even if they were, whatever sequence they had ready for it, I wonder if they would have tried a goal line, a quarterback sneak again after getting stuffed on the first quarterback sneak.
Well, what we were talking about, I think, during the game too, was just that was a rough quarterback sneak. You could have put that on here too for review. At this age, we talked about last week with J.J. Watt's comments. It's like if you're not getting something out of it, that's brutal.
What was the biggest thing? We don't have that one right now, but what was that? What was your biggest complaint with that QB sneak that didn't?
They just got fully the line just got fully rooted out. The D line just was able to get underneath all 3 of those front guys, and in the left guard especially too. He's really struggled And sometimes he does some good things with getting pushed, but they didn't get any kind of push.
Yeah.
And you don't have guys in the backfield that should be back there pushing him in the back. I mean,
That's
you should
what,
have 2 extra guys back there pushing him in the back.
That's where I rethought. Here, let me turn this volume down a little bit. That's where I rethought even going for it on 4th down on the play we just saw was in that sequence. It was so obvious that the offensive line isn't there. And even if you got a play designed to get out to the edges, you still run the risk of those guys penetrating the way they did.
Right.
They might have just – maybe Lovey should have just put it out there for the defense to try to stop, even though obviously they end up letting a touchdown on the next drive. This was an actual good play, and I want to play the volume. I want to play the volume a little bit because you can hear some of the O-line calls, and Sanchez points it out afterwards. But I wanted to get your opinion on Sanchez's appraisal of what was going on. So the offensive linemen are saying, can we bring him? Should we bring him? Are we bringing him?
They're running it.
There's the run. Pierce with a hole into the secondary, and Pierce leveling Cowboys all the way to the 40-yard line.
Plus, Pierce had like 8 yards after contact.
Oh, he blasted Malik Hooker as he picks up 24 to the 40.
Ooh.
Okay, so.
And you hear these O-linemen up front. They mic'd, right? Anthony Barr right in the middle, letting everybody know who the point guy is. Who exactly are we going to? And you hear the O-lineman saying, are we bringing it? Are we bringing it? Meaning, are we bringing the backside of the offensive line to cut off the backside of the defense?
So when they're saying that, are we bringing it? Are we bringing it? Who would that be saying? Would that be either the backside guard or tackle saying that to the center?
Yeah, well, it's probably the backside guy. But I also might just reject out of hand that that's what they were saying to begin with. I mean, that'd be a pretty, it's not a very simple or articulate way to communicate a call at the line. You know what I mean? It's usually, I don't know that that's what they were saying.
Do you think that might have not even been an offensive lineman?
Yeah, it's totally possible that wasn't even a lineman.
Like, that might have actually been somebody on the sideline or something on a parabolic.
Yeah, it could have been someone on the sideline. That could have been somebody, honestly, on defense. You don't know that it's not. But either way, but the calls, the terminology that they're making, they're still communicating that. I mean, you can see that they probably were changing who they were initially working to. You know, you have the mic obviously backed up. You have the other linebacker on the call side, that play side to the right where he's walked up right over the guard.
Yeah.
And they clearly, they did a great job of not reacting to it, I don't think, as it's happening, but expecting that it's going to happen and predicting it and managing it perfectly. I mean, this is one of the best runs that I've seen, on a
out of
short
these guys.
list. Yeah, out of these guys, out of this group.
Well, and because Kenyon Green does a little bit of he's checking that guard, but the guard the defensive tackle slants away, so then he comes back to the guy that was slanting his way.
They clearly are expecting it. I mean, across the board, you can tell that Tunsil turns back on his guy. The center lets the nose go all the way across. Yeah. And the left guard does a pretty decent job of reacting and then maintaining leverage to the call side. Center goes up to the backer, and they do. It's pretty clean. Looks good.
Okay, there you go. There's your dose of positivity.
Yeah,
and,
it's a great single play that they had during that whole game.
It was. This was. Look, if it weren't for the history of the 2022 Texans, this would have been a fun game to watch and think about afterwards.
That's a great way to look at it. That's true.
That's the way I try to live my life, Drew. There is no 1-10 or 10-1 and 1. It's just all
0-0.
It's 0-0.
Yeah.
That's what's the score? I don't care. How much time is left? I don't know. I'm just playing football.
Right.
That's a Frank Gant Sr. used to be required. He used to yell, "What's the score?" And you'd have to yell back, "I don't care." And then he'd say, "I don't know how much time is left." Like, "I don't care," or something like that.
Yeah, coaching mantras.
Yeah, he was cool. Frank Gant Sr. was a former Naval Academy guy. He used to show us fighter jet training videos and heavyweight boxing matches to teach tackling technique, actually, or delivering a blow, same arm, same leg. He would show boxing videos all the time. Then he'd show Navy SEALs training videos because just to talk about attention to detail and not letting the other guy down and everything. It was really cool stuff because he was an actual veteran. It wasn't like a cheesy football coach trying to tell you that you're actually
that it's like
the
war,
beaches
that
at Normandy.
football is war.
Yeah.
There's
You're
a lot
no
of
less,
that, or there used
you're
to
no
be.
less courageous than those men that stormed the beaches.
Yeah. You're the Greeks at the Battle of Thermopylae.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's like, not really.
Okay, the false start, because we talked about this a little bit last week. Jeez. So this is, I think I put both Laramie's false starts in here.
Just to pile on.
Just to pile on.
Just to pile on one of the best
that
players.
Laramie Tunsil has got these issues with false starts because otherwise he's one of the best players on the team. Right. And I know you're thinking like, oh, that's not saying much, but it's something. He's a best player on any team in the league, except for the false start issues. This is a good angle right here. I mean, you talked about him rolling out of his stance last week, and just watch that. Center's head is down. He starts rolling out.
He's already moving, yeah.
And then his head comes up, and there's a snap, and then everybody else goes. I mean, he's
also not even. I mean, he's not even on sides. That should have been a penalty.
Right, he's already. Yeah, his head is well past the center's waistband. So is the right tackle. You're right. You mentioned this the other day. They're getting away with that a lot.
A lot. The challenge with him too. I mean, because I'm sure Laramie is listening and wants to hear my coaching tips.
Yeah.
Is that. It's one of those things where there are tackles that you've seen, Seth, too, especially when you're playing defense, that they really kind of need that awareness of when the ball's being snapped because they're not the quickest or fleetest of foot. They need that advantage. Yeah. And that's just not really been Tunsil. I mean, he's quick. I mean, he's a fast moving, quick reaction kind of tackle. I don't think he needs to do this stuff.
Right.
That's the thing. He really doesn't have to do it, but he does it anyway.
Okay, so this is the second one then, because it's 2nd and 15. And this one, you can see the center's head move just a minuscule amount.
Yep.
To where I wonder, and there's how much time left? There's still, there's only, okay.
That's all him. That's all him.
You pointed this out, though. There was only 1 second left on the play clock.
Right. They weren't getting that off anyway.
But nobody else messes it up. You're right. Why?
That was gonna be a delayed game anyway.
Let me turn this volume up. Because
they've had a lot of these too.
Okay, so you see AJ Can saying something to Quesenberry, the center.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was supposed to be. Oh boy. Okay, now watch AJ Can here. He had already tapped the center, kind of give him the notification that it's okay to go. And he's looking back. AJ Can, the right guard, is looking back like, what's going on?
Like, why haven't you snapped it?
So that one's on. Is that one on
I think that
Davis?
might be on the. I almost want to put that on the center, to be honest.
On the center?
Yeah, kind of.
Center should have just gone.
Well, I mean, no. In a perfect world, you're snapping it the way you should, and it's a silent count, and everyone knows, from practice over and over again when exactly that pause is. But that doesn't look right. One, it was going to be a delayed game. Everyone else clearly thought it was supposed to be snapped. Okay. So that's just a debacle, start to finish. It's not good.
I don't like this silent count.
I don't either.
When I put myself in an offensive lineman's position or situation, that's a lot of timing in a high stress environment to try to figure out exactly when you're going and trust that everybody else is. There's no beat to keep a rhythm to or anything. Which would be hard enough in front of 75,000 people.
Right. Yeah. It's
with your heart rate at 160.
Yeah. Well, at the most critical moment when you're probably down and they're going to be blitzing and or putting their best rushers out there, it's not a good situation.
So the head comes up and you're kind of conditioned that if it's on one, the head comes up and the ball's going to come a beat after that.
Right. And the challenge there too is, I mean, you're hoping obviously that you have no issues with, who's been playing center. I mean, if you have reliable center, it's always been. But if you have guys that are, there's an injury or guys have been rotating, I mean, pretty much every center has a slightly different, pace with which they do it, especially if they're going on two, things like that. It's just repetition. You're used to doing it in practice over and over and over again.
Okay, so this is Mike McCarthy, or a story about Mike McCarthy from the sideline reporter at the beginning of the game. And this is when I felt like there was a really good chance that the Cowboys weren't going to come out ready for this game, when I heard her talking about how prepared this Cowboys team was to prepare to play a team that they knew was definitely inferior to them.
With McCarthy talking about facing two opponents today, the team this week with McCarthy talking about facing two opponents today, the Texans and the Mirror, saying the only thing that can stop us is us. He told me everyone, all players were here by 9:30 this morning saying the locker room was jumping.
It's a good sign.
Everybody was there this morning. Everybody attended.
They showed up.
This morning.
They showed up to the game.
Well,
They were
remember
there. Yeah.
the stories when he left Green Bay? The story was that McCarthy had kind of checked out and would be late to meetings because he was getting his back worked on because he has back issues, and like all this weird stuff. And then Aaron Rodgers was just out on even communicating with him, whatever the changes in the offense were. So I feel like his indication that everybody was in and by 9 a.m. in the locker room was jumping was a lost cause already in trying to convince them that the Texans were good. Like anytime a coach tells you, and I can remember this with Coughlin. I think this was Tom Coughlin before he started to get a little bit more of an idea of how human beings operate. He used to like guard against complacency. It wasn't when we were good, we'd go against bad teams, and the message was, don't get complacent. Human nature is to be complacent. You have to be constantly testing yourself and challenging yourself, which is true philosophically and probably, psychologically and chemically. But that's not the best way to actually motivate you to want to go out and beat somebody that's across from you.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. Complacency is not. Yeah, it's not the most effective motivator. Or fear of complacency,
like
right?
You're not down in your stance like I'm going to kick complacency's ass. I'm going
to be so non-complacent. Yeah,
I remember that time complacency talked smack about me in the paper.
People are always going to remember me for my ability to overcome complacency.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. But it is what's funny is that it's both a completely valid reason for why teams lose games.
Yeah.
Like it is. It does happen, but it's not that's kind of one of those things where as a coach where that level of I don't know if that level of candor or honesty, it doesn't really work to motivate the guys, right? Like it's not in my opinion, I don't
it's
think
not
really,
visceral.
It's right.
It's describing a psychological phenomenon. Which is different than it's a psychology class versus, hey,
you're right.
Okay, I recognize what the issue is, but I feel like Belichick and other coaches are really good at realizing that the solution is we're going to build these guys up in this guy's minds. And also maybe some of that overstating, Saban calls it the rat poison that the media feeds guys when they're feeling good about themselves, is a little bit of just, put downs, like testing your, questioning just how good you really are, because that's visceral when somebody questions whether you're really just that good.
Well, it creates ambiguity, right? Because it's what specifically are you saying we're doing that is creating or making us fearful of what does that? I don't know what that means as a player.
Right.
I don't have specific control over the vibe of complacency. You know, it's a weird thing to sort of like to try to articulate to someone versus. What you're trying to ask is, are we the kind of mature team that doesn't get caught sleeping at the wheel? Are we the team that's actually going to do that? Are we, those are the things that you always worry about, those teams that go on these stretches of suddenly being really good. You wonder, like, are they going to get caught sleeping at the wheel, like on game 9, week 9 when that happens?
And that's where
because it happens all the time, right?
It's tough too because I think that's a recognition and maybe a barometer of where you are. Maybe a coach is asking his players to monitor whether they're really thinking that way, but it's an identification of the problem. It's not motivating them to actually do something about it. It's just it's like anytime you feel unmotivated, like when you're sitting on the couch watching binge watching something, like what the issue is. Like you're not it's not you sit there and you hate yourself for doing it, like why am I doing this when I should be doing other stuff? So identifying the problem is not the issue. It's okay, how can I actually motivate myself to do something? And that's what I've been binge watching stuff about dopamine responsiveness and all this stuff. This is what happens sometimes is you don't get sometimes in life these days, especially, the dopamine is too readily available because of smartphones and everything. So the alternative, which is something that might also create dopamine, which, completing tasks or exercising or defeating the Texans, things like that, they're not as easy. we've got so many other easy things that can create a dopamine response. So one of the biggest things is just eliminating distractions, like eliminating all those things that can give you that easy dopamine.
They can lead to that. That's a great way to look at it. Yeah, I mean, I just lean on smash cuts of Rocky 3.
Yeah.
Like most people do, I think, on YouTube. But if you don't.
But you know what happens though? Those motivational videos if you go on YouTube, the problem is if you start watching too many of them on a loop, then it almost has a demotivating effect, or like a stressful effect of like I feel so motivated, but all I'm doing is sitting here watching motivational videos.
I just can't stop watching these motivational videos.
Yeah. If I could really, accomplish something if I weren't sitting here getting so motivated by a motivational video.
That's a great point. Those are the pitfalls.
I do think that some guys like Jack Easterby and others, I think sometimes they do fall into a trap of watching too many TED Talks per day. And like ideally, you should watch or read one motivational thing per day, in my opinion, because anything more than that, and it starts getting you too far outside the box, you get to the point where you start thinking, and I'm not even talking about motivational stuff. I'm kind of talking about the stuff that encourages you to think about things differently, think of things from a different perspective. But you always run the hazard of getting to the point where you think that as long as I'm outside the box, I must be doing it right.
Yes.
Instead of realizing, sometimes your best work is done inside the box.
Or completely agree. Or the act of engaging with those memes or sources of media, whatever it is that motivates you, is accomplishing something in and of itself.
Yeah.
Like, this is the work. This is me. Look at what I'm doing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm always staying on task.
Yes.
And I feel like the Easterbys of the world, I feel like you see that where it's the fact that they're even doing the action of showing that they're interested in that shows how important it is to them.
Yeah.
I'm like, that in and of itself is not productive.
That's not productive.
That's not productive. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I had tons of coaches that were prolific speech givers, tremendous at getting me fired up and motivated. I mean, that stuff wears off after 90 seconds?
Yeah.
I mean, it goes, as soon as the ball snapped, at best you make it to when the ball snapped, and then that's, that goes out the window.
I do think motivating somebody long term, and by long term, I guess I mean for 2 hours, is a whole different test and that's when it comes down to standards and habits and all those things. I'll send you some literature and several TED Talks about the dopamine thing.
Yeah.
There's a guy, Andrew Huberman, who is very interesting. He's a neurologist or a neuroscientist, some kind of neuro something at Stanford. But he's got a podcast, and he does like these 3-hour long lessons on things.
I'm a fan.
Oh yeah, okay.
You might be about ready to tear him up. I don't know. I mean,
no. I like him a lot.
I like his stuff. Yeah,
I like him, but he's also kind of gotten sucked into that bro science circle.
You're right. Yeah, he does. Well, they all kind of do, right? It becomes a business or a brand. It's
profitable. Yeah. I feel like Huberman. I like Huberman because Huberman is very progressive about like thinking about things on the cutting edge, and yet backs it all up with studies, for like multiple studies, meta-analyses, all these, and always is very careful to say it looks like this could happen. But like when he's saying it to Joe Rogan's like, so what you're saying is this stuff will turn me into a superhuman.
Exactly right.
And
these tools in the hands of the wrong brain are not really what I was going for. That's exactly it. That's the answer. You're like, man, I just know the wrong group of people are going to have the worst takeaways from this. Yeah, that's exactly right.
How often these days a sidentist in a lab is like, crap, this is going to be completely misinterpreted and used by some alt group of somebody's.
Yeah, why didn't I just start a multi-level marketing scheme? This is so dumb. It's completely,
we live in an era where it's just way too easy for the dumbest person who agrees with your opinion about anything to become front and center. Like,
yes.
Like whichever political opinion you have, there's a really loud idiot out there who's going to gain prominence forwarding that opinion, but for all the wrong reasons.
Completely. It's weird to be worried about how prolific your messaging might be by just with the wrong person.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, I'm successful with the wrong people. It's like, damn, that's not what I was trying to do.
I don't want to go to a party with any of these people that,
Right.
like, I don't want to go to a party with any of these people who, many of whom have tattoos of my face on their shoulders.
Yes, and who keep paying the $10,000 fee to go to my summits. Like, oh, God, it's the worst. Yeah. It's just the worst. It's such an effective business model.
If I have a summit someday. Oh, good. All right, cool. I feel not one bit better about the Texans, other than that nice run play.
Yeah. Okay.
I do feel pretty good about some of the young players, like Jalen Petrie. And
he looked good. He stood out. He was one of the guys that stood out.
Yeah.
So that's a bright spot.
All right, buddy. Thank you. I don't know if anybody else enjoys breaking down false starts as much as I do. But
Yeah, I wonder. I guess we'll find out how much of a hit that is.
All right, buddy.
All right.